Welcome, fellow castigators. We are now more than halfway through this season of Doctor Who with Dot and Bubble, which I watched so that you don't have to. The story begins with a pound of makeup on a mop named Lindy Pepper Bean, waking up in the morning and activating a floating metal dot that projects a bubble around her head. The bubble shows her other people that have floating dots using an interface that looks like a cross between the Brady Bunch and the Nintendo Wii menu. She is greeted by her friends, including a music artist named Ricky September and a scary man named Dr. P, who informs her that her urination has been good. Dr. P actually shows up later in the episode, and it was the second moment this season to get a genuine laugh out of me. The Doctor suddenly appears on the bubble and warns Lindy that she's in danger, but she ignores him. Lindy talks with her friends about their community Find Time having the best Substack processing, which I assume is a not-so-clever reference to FaceTime. On her way to work, the bubble tells Lindy what direction to walk in while she somehow fails to hear people being eaten by monsters around her. Ruby appears on the bubble and pretends to be an authoritative Find Time employee in order to pump Lindy for information. Lindy is in the office insisting that her coworkers are at their desks, despite not hearing the sounds of other people in the room. The office is, of course, empty, and there is a slug monster close to Lindy, devouring someone. The Doctor and Ruby try to convince Lindy to turn off the dot, but she thinks that's a crazy idea. If Lindy never turns off the bubble at the office, why does she even have a desk? I don't know what Substack processing entails, but we can safely assume, based on what happens next, that most or all of the work is done in the bubble. Lindy eventually turns off the bubble and tries to escape the monster. Unfortunately, she doesn't know how to walk. She stumbles around the office, and it's very hard to believe. I feel like instinct would completely override this. It's mentioned later that there is no one younger than 17 in Find Time, so Lindy can't have been here more than a few years. The actress is older than Find Time's age limit, so the character is presumably younger. Even if the dots are used just as prolifically on their homeworld, there wouldn't be any reason for a child to use one until they can speak politely, so Lindy must have been walking without one for enough years to develop that skill. Regardless, Lindy just cannot figure out how to walk. So she uses the bubble to leave the office despite its probable untrustworthiness. Lindy operates the lift, which has a monster in it, and almost experiences the world's slowest death.
Watch out! Watch out! Watch out!
Fortunately, Lindy moves to the side just in time, and the monster ignores her. She tries to phone the police using the bubble, but the line is busy. After the Doctor criticizes her, Lindy declares, "I'm not a child," which is hilarious coming from someone who can't walk. Lindy steps out onto the street without the bubble, now noticing the screams all around her. She can't cope with it, so she hides in a corner and turns on the bubble. Lindy explains to the Doctor and Ruby that Find Time is made up of rich kids between the ages of 17 and 27, who work only 2 hours a day and then party. If they almost never turn off the bubbles, what do their parties look like? Their stay is paid for by their wealthy parents, and we are shown a recording of Susan Twist as Lindy's mother. The Doctor notes that she looks familiar, but then sonics the recording away. If the Doctor can control the bubble interface with his sonic screwdriver, why didn't he turn off the bubble or do any of the other things they needed to do to save Lindy's life? Anyway, the Doctor tells Lindy that if she follows the river flowing under Find Time, then it will lead her to the forest. On her way, Lindy walks directly into a pole face first, and then runs into Ricky September. Ricky helps her avoid the monsters and enter a tunnel. He accesses a panel that shows that their homeworld has been taken over by the slugs, but he hides it from Lindy. As Lindy and Ricky make their way downstream, the Doctor figures out that the slugs are eating people in alphabetical order, according to their surnames. He pulls up the list of names and sees the woman listed before Lindy die. The doctor theorizes that the Dots have developed a hatred for their masters and somehow created the slugs to kill the populace. Just so you know, this will be the only explanation you get. The Dot zooms around trying to kill Lindy, but Ricky bats it out of the way. Lindy ruthlessly points out to the Dot that Ricky's original surname is Coombs, so the Dot propels itself through Ricky's forehead as Lindy escapes. First off, wouldn't the AI smart enough to create living creatures be able to figure out Ricky's previous surname, especially since that information is in its system? Secondly, if the Dots can kill people so quickly and unexpectedly, then why did they create the slug creatures in the first place? Anyhow, Lindy successfully makes it to the edge of Find Time, where the Doctor, Ruby, and a number of refugees are gathered. The Doctor offers to find them a new world to inhabit, but it turns out that the people of Find Time are racist and refuse the Doctor's help. This is way out of left field, considering there were no indications. Sure, Lindy was heartless, but Ricky seemed like a nice guy. Maybe we were supposed to guess based on the all-white cast, but if anything, you'd be more racist to be that focused on skin color. The Doctor offers again anyway, but they still refuse. This is without a doubt Shudigatwa's best scene in this series so far. For the first time, his reaction actually felt genuine. To end the episode, the refugees of Find Time slowly depart on a boat as the Doctor looks on and cries for the millionth time, and then leaves with Ruby. You know, an episode about the all-consuming nature of social media and remote interaction, along with the vapid performative nature of modern society, could have been a timely, poignant, and welcome story. Unfortunately, Russell T Davies doesn't quite know what to do with it, and instead meanders around with Lindy stumbling from point A to point B until it winds up being about racism. It doesn't end up feeling like a criticism of the pompous youth who live blinded by the media, groping in the dark to find meaning while missing out on everything that's actually happening, but instead feels like Russell is saying, "Aren't white people dumb? Aren't white societies the worst?" It plays as if Russell is fighting racism with racism, which isn't constructive at all. There is nothing about one's skin color that dictates how a society is built, or how intelligent a society is, and to imply such a thing is racist no matter which color you point it at. Furthermore, there is nothing inherently wrong with a homogeneous society, and likewise there is nothing inherently wrong with a mixed society. To say otherwise is to put a special importance on race, which is the most basic racism. In other words, if Russell is trying to say what it looks like he's saying, then Russell is being terribly, terribly racist. This would seem to imply that he hates his country, hates the legacy of the show, and hates the majority of his viewers. It's no wonder that his peers dealt with racism in a much kinder manner in The Shakespeare Code and Human Nature. Besides, if Russell is going to write the most random and baffling conclusion to a Doctor Who episode to date, the bulk of the story could at least be developed properly instead of lazy dialogue with not much else to look at. I can hardly believe that the most important plot point is revealed through a singular throwaway line during the Doctor's musings. Science fiction will always require suspension of disbelief to some extent, so it's really not good form to explain the foundations of your plot in a blink-and-you'll-miss-it moment. We're not told how or why the Dots hate the residents. We're not explained how the Dots created the slug creatures. We're not told if the Doctor is even correct about his guesses, or how this society runs properly with a bunch of kids working 2 hours a day. I don't need every little detail related to me, but it would have been nice to at least have seen evidence of some logic. Maybe we could have seen more automation in the living quarters, office buildings, and streets of Find Time. Maybe Lindy and Ricky could have stumbled upon the slug creatures being bioengineered under the city. I'm not asking for much, just a little more thought than the doctor randomly suggesting that the metal dots hate people now somehow. It doesn't help that we only have 3 episodes left, and Russell has yet to show us that he can write something other than stories where absolutely nothing happens. Lindy talks through the bubble and wanders around for 30 minutes, then does nothing in a tunnel for 5 minutes, and then boom, racism. The end. This episode was nice when it looked like it was ragging on intellectually inept phone zombies. But then it was a toothless commentary on racism the whole time. Russell doesn't actually have anything to say about racism, other than maybe white people bad. But none of the events are logical enough for me to safely assume that. What he gave us instead was an unclear, unentertaining, and ultimately pointless series of happenings that barely constitute a story. Lastly, why didn't he just name the episode simply Fine Time? That's a much better title. Anywho, if you would like me to continue watching this series so that you don't have to, then you can subscribe and await Rogue, which I hope isn't nearly as long and boring as this one. Thanks for listening.